On a dark night in 1995, a young man stepped onto the last bus heading to Fragrant Hills, Haitian district. Soon the driver saw two people on the side of the road trying to stop the bus and get on. At first the driver was reluctant since they were not waiting at a bus stop, but the kind-hearted conductor put in some good words, saying it was already the last bus. So the driver let them in. The other passengers took a look, and were surprised to see the two people were in officials' robes of the Qing dynasty, and they supported a third person by the arms, whose hair was hanging loose. Their faces were much wider than a normal person's, and they didn't say anything. The other passengers looked on nervously. The conductor soothed people by saying they were probably actors who had no time to change costumes. Gradually, the bus emptied as passengers got off the bus, until only the young man and an old lady remained. Suddenly, the old lady claimed her wallet was missing, and that the young man was the thief. The two entered a fierce argument which ended in the old lady insisting they get off the bus right away and head to the nearest police station to settle the matter. As the bus drove off, the young man became enraged when he saw no police station in sight. Then the old lady said, "I saved your life, young man. Those who just got on bus were ghosts, not humans." "You're out of your mind," the young man replied. "The breeze coming in from the window lifted their robes, and I saw they didn't have feet," said the old lady. The next day, the last Xiangshan-bound bus was reported missing, and was later found miles away from its destination, with 3 heavily rotted bodies, the driver's, the conductor's, and one unknown body with long, messy hair. The year stated in the story is 1995, however the story had been in circulation much earlier than this. In some versions, it's told as a real-life crime rather than a ghost story. The main protagonists in some versions are an old man and a young girl instead of old woman and young man. Just treat it as a ghost story to be told in social gathering. Urban dwellers often has some phobia about everyday life that can be projected into urban legend. Cities like Hong Kong that's been under Japanese occupation has story about ghost of Japanese soldiers killing people etc. Taking the last bus home seems risky and dangerous for city dwellers, hence such fear is projected as ghost stories to help people deal with a mundane working life. Just a bit of background, I am 25F, this happened between ages 15 and 16 growing up, my family and I lived in a pretty rural area. My high school was 25 minutes away by car, so you can imagine a bus ride was even longer, took about an hour. I had the same bus driver from middle school, until I eventually got my license and could drive myself to school. He was the driver for the route I lived on for a long time, even after I didn't ride the bus anymore. The bus driver was a little too friendly towards me sometimes. He was a man maybe in his mid-40s, had one of those 70s porn star mustaches. Balding. Stereotypical bus driver look, I suppose. Anyways, I had to catch the bus at 6:30 a.m. and my house was a good mile away from the bus stop, so I had to be out the door before then. Most days, I would just get up, shower and fix my hair and head out. It was a long bus ride, so my friend who lived at the next stop and I always just did our makeup on the bus. Why not, right? Saved me from waking up earlier than I already had to. Sometimes getting off the bus, Carl would say things like, "Oh, you look so beautiful today," and whatnot. It was a little creepy, but I wasn't concerned. I was always allowed to have food and drinks on the bus when other kids weren't, so I guess that part kind of worked out in my favor. LOL. That kind of stuff went on all through my first 2 years of high school. Usually, I was one of the last people on the bus, because well, I was one of the last stops. It was always just really awkward. Always trying to make small talk and just be overly friendly. He even asked me one time if I just wanted him to drop me off at my house because I was the last person on the bus. No thanks. I lied and said someone would be coming to get me from the bus stop, didn't need that creep to know where I lived. I'd usually sit in the back and ask him to turn the music up, so of course he would try and talk to me about music. I had mentioned to him in one of his awkward, small talk conversations that he was trying to have with me that I really liked classic rock. Pink Floyd etc. One day getting off the bus and Carl hands me a mix CD he made for me. To me that was weird, I don't know, like WTF. You are my bus driver, I don't know you, all you do is drive me back and forth to school. He put weird-ass songs on it too, like The Love Shack. I tried to kind of downplay it, like oh he's just being nice, but thought it was still kind of, well, weird. Fast forward to after I get my driver's license. Finally, I don't have to ride the bus anymore. Sometimes I would pass by the school bus, and of course, there was Carl waving at me. Driving the school bus. Oh well though, no big deal. So I am at work one weekend and in walks Carl with some kid that was maybe 8 or 9. He said, "Oh, how you doing, blah blah, miss you on the bus, blah blah," then me smiling and being polite, but really I am like, please just shut the fuck up. Then I gave him his food and he sat down. He stayed in there with that poor kid for like an hour. Who stays at a fast food joint that long? Okay, maybe some people do, but there was just something weird to me about him being there forever. Finally, Carl leaves. Not even 10 minutes later, he comes back in, up to the counter and says to me, "Are you getting off soon? My car won't start and I was wondering if you could give me a ride home." My heart started pounding. I was just like all I could picture was me dead in some ditch. Then he said, "I only live 15 minutes away." Finally, I just lied and said I would not be getting off for a few hours, but really I was shitting my pants because I would be getting off work in 10 minutes. I told my boss and he had someone walk me out to my car. When I got home I told my mom what had happened. She was really upset and she called the bus barn for the school district where he worked out of. The lady on the phone had told my mom that apparently, the school district bus drivers were all having a food drive at the local grocery store, which shared a parking lot with McDonald's. They were literally right next to each other, and he knew they were there. There was even a big yellow bus out there that had the school district's name on it. She said he could have easily walked the 200 feet and asked any one of those people and asked them for a ride. It was just really weird. I don't know what would have happened if I gave him a ride, but all sorts of bells and whistles were going off in my head when he asked. It just wasn't right. I saw Carl about 4 years after that when I was working at a sporting goods store. As soon as I saw him I was just kinda like, really? I am not done seeing you. He came up to me and grabbed me and gave me a big hug. It was weird. After that I was on the lookout and any time I saw him come into the store I hid. The last time I saw him was 5 years ago. Thank God. My brother, who also rode his bus back in the day, would see him at the sporting goods store he worked at frequently as well. Carl always would say hello, but quickly would make me the topic of conversation. "Oh, how is your sister? Where is she working now?" All this was up until about a year ago when my brother quit the sporting goods store he worked at. It was really weird experience. Obviously, the guy is a little off. The incident took place near Portage La Prairie, Manitoba, during a trip from Edmonton to McLean's hometown of Winnipeg. At 12:01 p.m. on July 30, 2008, Tim McLean, a carnival barker, was returning home to Manitoba after working at a fair in Alberta. He departed Edmonton on board Greyhound Bus 1170 to Winnipeg, via the Yellowhead Highway through Saskatchewan. He sat at the rear, one row ahead of the toilet. At 6:55 p.m., the bus departed from a stop in Erickson, Manitoba, with a new passenger, Vince Wagwangli Lee, described as a tall man in his 40s, with a shaved head and sunglasses, originally sat near the front of the bus, but moved to sit next to McLean following a scheduled rest stop. McLean barely acknowledged Lee, then fell asleep against the window pane, headphones covering his ears. According to witnesses, McLean was sleeping with his headphones on when the man sitting next to him suddenly produced a large knife and began stabbing McLean in the neck and chest. The bus driver pulled to the side of the road so that he and all the other passengers could exit the vehicle. The attacker then decapitated McLean and displayed his severed head to other passengers standing outside. The driver and 2 other men had attempted to rescue McLean but were chased away by Lee, who slashed at them from behind the locked bus doors. Lee then went back to McLean's body and began severing other parts and consuming some of his victim's flesh. At 8:30 p.m., the Royal Canadian Mounted Police in Portage La Prairie received a report of a stabbing on a Greyhound bus west of the city. They arrived to find the suspect still on board the bus, being prevented from escaping by another passenger, the bus driver, and a truck driver who had provided a crowbar and a hammer as weapons. The other passengers were huddled at the roadside, some of them crying and vomiting. As the suspect had earlier attempted to escape by driving the bus away, the driver had engaged the emergency immobilizer system, rendering the vehicle inoperable. Witnesses had observed the suspect stabbing and cutting McLean's body, and carrying McLean's severed head. By 9 p.m., police were in a standoff with the suspect and had summoned special negotiators and a heavily armed. The suspect alternately paced the length of the bus and defiled the corpse. Police officers then observed Lee eating parts of the body. Meanwhile, the stranded passengers were transported from the scene to be interviewed at the Brandon RCMP detachment. RCMP officers reportedly heard Lee say, "I have to stay on the bus forever." On July 31, 2008, at 1:30 a.m., the suspect attempted to escape from the bus by breaking through a window. The RCMP arrested Lee soon afterward. He was shot with a taser twice, handcuffed and placed in the back of a police cruiser. Parts of the victim's body, placed in plastic bags, were retrieved from the bus, while his ear, nose, and tongue were found in Lee's pockets. The victim's eyes and a part of his heart were never recovered and are presumed to have been eaten by Lee. At 10 a.m., Greyhound representatives took the other passengers to a local store to replace their clothes, which remained on the bus. They arrived in Winnipeg at 3:30 p.m. that day, to be reunited with family members and friends. Lee's trial commenced on March 3, 2009, with Lee pleading not criminally responsible. This means that he accepted that the offense occurred, but he claimed that he was unable to form the necessary mental element or mens rea. The psychiatrist said that Lee performed the attack because God's voice told him McLean was a force of evil and was about to execute him. The presiding judge, John Schofield, accepted the diagnosis and ruled that Lee was not criminally responsible for the killing. Lee was remanded to the Selkirk Mental Health Center.